Hi there, welcome to the archives. So, this one is called Contagious Fear. I was watching Netflix's Mo a couple of nights ago, and it got me thinking about a few different themes, including emotions, mental health, and autism. But in this post, I'm going to focus specifically on um, the emotion of fear. And I'm thinking specifically about the scene where they're at the boxing ring and Mo's tattoo artist is brought into the facility with his head covered. So I wasn't particularly fond of the way they did the fat character with diabetes, mostly because mainstream media somehow always depicts the person with chronic disease or disability as a villain. It's nothing new. It's We're tired of that script, guys. It's also super annoying because he's fat, right? We always see like the fat person is like the bad one, the villain. People have talked about this. If you look at Disney characters, like Ursula is often brought up in The Little Mermaid as like this depiction of the fat woman as like the evil person. Disabled people is often like the bad characters. I'm not going to get into that because I digress. What I want to talk about is that character, his fear, uh, the character with the diabetes, his fear, his lack, his scarcity, and I'm not thinking necessarily about wealth because I'm sure he's very wealthy based on the work that he does. I don't mean that. I'm not talking about material or physical. I'm talking about energetic power. I'm talking about spiritual power. I'm talking about internal power, self awareness, abundance, mentality, these kinds of things that have him hustling to survive the way he does. We see very quickly how he needs to rope others in. So his fear turns into Mo's fear, right? That is contagion is this idea that things spread. So coronavirus, for instance, is contagious, right? We're told it's in the air. If you're in the same um, room where it's in the air, and you're not masked up, there's a chance that you might get coronavirus because it is contagious. Fear as an invisible object is very much similar to that. Sarah Almond's work talks a lot about the objects of fear, or the objects of emotions in general. So again, his fear turns into Mo's fear. Now it's not just his fear. Because you wouldn't even think that he's in fear, right? Because you think like, oh, he's the one that's in power. Boom, boom, boom. He's the one that's calling the shots. Sometimes those type of people are often in deep, deep, deep fear and have to rope others in to make them feel more themselves more powerful. I'm gonna get into that. So he does that by striking fear into Mo, right? Which gives him now power over Mo. So this is how fear works. It needs an ally. It loves to multiply in numbers. It's like misery that it loves company. We feel fear and then we can't sit in it alone, so we got to invite others to join us in this fear. This isn't always intentional or even conscious, which makes the emotion of fear even more dangerous. Because if you're not aware that you're even doing and moving this way, and then your subconscious is just automatically like get people into fear, that can become really toxic. But in my work, I'm really, especially the chapter on Octavia Butler using fledging and fear, I'm interested in fear that we intentionally inject into others to control and dominate them. Just like the homeboy with diabetes did with Mo and the tattoo artist. So he's actually not the strongest link in the room if you think about it, right? If you have to do all of this gymnastics to get others to comply, that's not actually like you actually don't feel power because you need them. You need to tap into their faculties to gain that power, right? You actually might be the weakest link, needing to do all of these things in order to assert yourself and over others. Um, and so Octavia Butler talks about, no, I'm going to get into that. So we tend to think that power is something that, if you make people afraid of you, then like if you were scary, then you are the one that's the most powerful. Yes and no. Um, but when you have to start roping others in, we're talking about like parasitic dynamics, right? It's very vampiric. Like we talk about psychic vampires. That's how they work. They tap into your energy field because they don't have enough energy. themselves. Narcissists are often talked about in this way, right? The narcissist needs to be able to tap into your energetic field to drain you of your emotions because they themselves have these gaping holes that they can't fill, and so they have to tap into others. This is not necessarily my language. I'm just talking about how in the literature and in communities, subcultures, it's talked about. So in Fledging, Octavia Butler writes about vampires. She talks about hosts, the idea of sucking blood or life force in order to maintain life, right? That's how vampires kind of operate and move. You need to be able to, in the book, they need to suck other people's blood uh, to get their energy, their life force. Getting addicted to being drained, and then the people who have their blood sucked by the vampires, they become addicted to it, right? It's like this parasitic relationship. There's another word I'm trying to think about, and I can't find it in my notes. I talk about the dynamic, but I can't think about it right now, so it's fine. But they become addicted to, it's so intoxicating, getting their blood sucked. Fear is very much like that, right? We actually thrive in the chaos of fear, some of us. Like we get a hit out of it. It feels so good to have others fear us. We get addicted to making others fearful of us. It's exhilarating to watch people suffer and squirm as a result of fear that they have over us, which is like shame in this way. The emotion of fear is wound up with power. So we use fear to control others. We use fear to dominate them. Makes fear political, just as Sarah Ahmed talks about in her work extensively. Shame moves us, it affects us. I talked about that in a couple episodes ago. Not just relationally. So fear doesn't just move us relationally, like Brene Brown talks about with with shame that moves us away, against, and toward. Fear also distances us, yes, like relationally, but it moves us away from ourselves. It moves us physiologically, it moves us neurologically, chemically, at a cellular level. This is why fear is tied to health, not just mental health, but chronic disease and other life-threatening fatal conditions like heart disease and diabetes. Fear is connected with stress. Science has proven this, which is, we know stress causes a lot of wear and tear on the body. Lauren Berlant's work talks about a slow death, not this like kind of mundane dying of the body. The wear and tear, stress does that. Fear does that, right? You can find that conversation with wound up with fear, which I try to do and argue in my work. And Mbembe talks about necropolitics, this obsession with dying and dead bodies, right? We've seen that with the pandemic. People have talked about eugenics. People have talked about how the elderly and folks with disabilities have kind of been left to die because we don't care. It's like, 7 billion people died. 7 million people, sorry. 7 million people died of COVID. Oh, well, it's just like, it doesn't faze us anymore, right? We're just obsessed with it. Like, it's just disposable. That's not normal. Again, we find fear in this conversation as well, too. So going back to Mo, Netflix's Mo, you can see how when he gets caught up with his father's story, all of these emotions and trauma starts to surface, right? Which literally makes him more anxious. These emotions do something to his mental health. He's sitting in the car and he's like seeing his father, like, right? And which almost always leads to addiction-related issues. He starts getting addicted to lean. He starts to make poor, high-risk decisions. All of a sudden, drugs end up in his car. All of a sudden, he ends up in Mexico. Like, he's not even in control of his life no more, right? This is how fear operates. Now you don't even know what you're doing. You're just like moving. He's just like, he calls his girl. He's like, yeah, I have no clue how I got into Mexico. Probably a lot of fear. This is why I'm so committed to doing emotions work. This is why for me it's so important that we start talking about emotions in these ways. That kind of attests to, that teaches what they are, how they move us, and how they got us fucked up. Because emotions really have us fucked up more times. I want to name my memoir How Shame Got Me Fucked Up, because I'm sorry if you don't like curse words, but that's literally what emotions do to you if you don't know what they're doing to you. And men in particular, as we see with Mo, emotions have him all left up, and men will be like, no, I don't feel emotions, you're the emotional one. They're telling women we're emotional. They're claiming they don't feel emotions. I highly doubt it. You're probably very emotional. You just haven't associated anything other than anger as acceptable to feel. But emotions are definitely impacting you, especially fear, especially if you have to gain control over others, especially if you have to tap into others for their energy. You're emotional. Sorry to break it to you. Or they're addicted to something. If you have an addiction of some sort, whether it be to weed, whether it be to whatever, this is no judgment on addiction because I'm right there with you. But if we have to learn to use other things to cope, almost always we're dealing with emotions that we can't manage properly, right? So it's not fair to say that we're not emotional, that only certain people are, that only women are emotional. Meanwhile, we can't stop smoking. Again, it's fine if you're smoking, but don't, almost always that's something going on around trauma related issues. And then they're like, we don't need therapy. Okay, don't go to therapy. Just keep, again, I'm not saying you need, that's a whole nother conversation. And so we're addicted, or our interpersonal relationships are messy, just like mine. I gotta go because this is getting long. There are other ways to understand fear. Fear as a parasitic object is just one theme that I'm considering. So next time you find yourself in fear, pause, pay attention, watch how it moves you. I want you to see if you can notice how it moves you to get others caught up in that fear too, right? Do you want to make a phone call to somebody? Do you want to go over to somebody's house? Do you want to fight somebody? Do you want to, like, what does fear make you want to do? How does it make you want to rope other people in? See how it makes you make bad decisions. Observe how it messes with your stress levels. Does it change your blood pressure? See if you are more paranoid, right? I bet you won't be able to sleep as well that night. You might even get into a fight with someone. You might make a really bad mistake. Just pay attention to fear, right? Does it have you out of your body, lacking any form of control? Do you feel like you can't control your temper? Observe how fear moves you. See what it does to your interpersonal relationships. The more we observe fear, the less power we give it. The more we name it, the more we distance ourselves from it. That's what I hope the future of emotions will be. Being able to identify and detect emotions like fear, name it for what it is, be knowledgeable about where it's coming from, and not just in this lifetime, but intergenerationally, ancestrally, right? If it's coming, fear also arrives from the future. Brian Masumi's work talks about fear that arrives from the future. So not just fear now, but where is fear coming from that collapses time and place for you? uh, Feel it without having it control your bodily faculties. So, can you feel fear without it raising your blood pressure, without it stressing you out? We have to learn to get to that point, and it is possible. Learn something from fear, or just even completely opt out of it and say, like, okay, agent, I see you here, fear. I don't want to play today. I'm not engaging in you today. I don't need to tap into fear today. But thanks for stopping by. I'm good, right? That's how I would hope more of us can relate to emotions that are difficult, like fear. Because right now, most of us don't know fear. We know fear by its name. More people are talking about fear, but we don't really know what it is or how it moves us, what it's doing to our bodies. We're not talking about fear and suicide, fear and mental health. I mean, we are talking about it. A lot of people have always been talking about it. Um, I hope we just continue to have more of these conversations. So educate yourself on emotions more. I'm doing the same. Let's start to, and then see how it transforms your life. Okay. So until next time, in solidarity, take care.